So when I was 18 years old, I joined the Army. And at basic training, this is around 2005. We were right in the middle. We were right in the middle of the Iraq War. And during basic training, my drill sergeants told me, you most likely won't be going to Iraq until after a year after you get out of basic training. That gave me some comfort. I graduated basic training in July. I received orders to go to Fort Hood, and out of 150 soldiers, only 2 of us went to Fort Hood. And if you go to Fort Hood, you know that you're going to go straight to Iraq. So when I got to Fort Hood, I got assigned to a unit, and my unit was being deployed to Iraq in November. So basic training, I had 3 months going to Iraq. Now as an 18-year-old kid out of Odessa, hadn't really traveled much, hadn't really been around the world like that. My first plane ride was the plane ride going to Kentucky for basic training. Now I was preparing myself for a combat zone. The night we arrived in Iraq, we laid down on our cots to get some sleep. And our sergeant ran into the room, woke us up, and said, come out here on the deck, because I want you to see what war sounds like. I didn't want to hear or see what war sounded like, but I had no choice. We had to go out there. We were on a deck, and you hear mortar rounds going off, you hear shots going off, and my first initial thought was, I'm gonna die. Like there's no getting out of this. I don't have the training. I don't know enough to be here, but I am here. And so for the next 6 months, I lived in fear. And this wasn't occasional fear. It was a constant fear. It never went away. Every mission, every patrol, every time we left the gate, I worried about getting shot. I worried about getting blown up. I worried about not making it home. I worried about my family. I worried about everything. And years later, I realized something. The biggest battle wasn't happening around me. The biggest battle was happening inside of me. I was speaking fear over my life every day. I was focused on everything that could go wrong. I was measuring my situation based on what I could do. And honestly, from a human perspective, there wasn't much I could do. I couldn't dodge a bullet. I couldn't negotiate with a roadside bomb. I couldn't control every situation. And the more I focused on what I couldn't control, the more fear controlled me. Psalms 56:3 says, when I am afraid, I put my trust in you. Notice, it didn't say if, it says when. Mm-hmm. Fear is a part of life. Fear visits every man. The question is not whether fear will show up. The question is who gets the final say when it does. So about 6 months into my employment, we were on a mission outside the gate. We had taken control of our house, and I had guard duty from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. In the morning. And so you have to go up on this roof. You have a 50 cal sniper rifle. You have your M4. You have some grenades, just in case things get hairy. But before the mission, I called several people. I called my mom. I called my uncle. I called Pastor Porter. I called my uncle, Pastor Lane. And every one of them told me, Aaron, give it to God. I wish I could tell you I understood exactly what that meant. I didn't. Because like many men, I wanted to handle it myself. I wanted to fix it myself. I wanted to carry it myself. But that night on the rooftop, I finally reached a point where I couldn't do it anymore. So I looked up and I prayed. And I asked God, if you let me live, God, if it's your will, let me live. But if it's not your will, give me peace. Then I did what a lot of us do. You start making deals with God. God, if you get me through this, I'll do whatever you ask me to do. And I remember the very first deal I made with God, I lived in Crane, Texas. And my mama told me, you got to be home before the street lights come on. And we was out there hanging out with my friends, watching a movie. I walked out of his house, the street lights were on. So I took off running. That was my first deal. God, please don't let her beat me. Because I know she said, be home before the street lights come on. He heard what I said, but she still beat me that day. But that was one of my first deals that I tried to make with God, right? For the next 2 hours, I stood on that rooftop. And I'm grateful nothing happened because I was not pulling any guard duty. I was just crying out to God in the middle of that rooftop. But something inside of me happened. A shift took place. The war didn't stop. The danger didn't disappear. The mission didn't change. But my heart changed. My perspectives changed. My self-talk changed. That fear that had been controlling me lost its grip. And for the first time in 6 months, I experienced peace. Peace in war. Not because I knew I would survive, but because I knew God was in control. 1 Peter 5:7 says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. For the first time, I stopped carrying something I wasn't meant to carry alone. And that brings me to my favorite story in the Bible, Numbers 13. When God tells the Israelites that he's given them the promised land. So Moses sent 12 spies into the land. All 12 spies saw the same thing. The same giants, the same city, the same challenges, the same obstacles. And then when they came back, 10 spies said, we can't do it. The giants are too big. We look like grasshoppers in our own eyes. Think about that statement. Before they ever lost a battle, they lost a battle in their minds. Before they were defeated by the giants, they were defeated by their own thinking. But Joshua and Caleb came back with a different report. Caleb said, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. The giants weren't different. The circumstances weren't different. God wasn't different. Their perspective was different. 10 spies focused on the size of the problem. Joshua and Caleb focused on the size of God. And what stands out to me is what happens next. You never hear from the 10 spies in the Bible ever again. Most people can't even name them. But Joshua and Caleb continued through Scripture. Joshua became the leader who took the Israelites to the promised land. Caleb is still taking mountains at 85 because he never stopped believing in God. Why? Because when God moves, they move. When God said trust, they trust. When God said go, they went. The others chose fear. Joshua and Caleb chose faith. And I think a lot of men today are living like the 10 spies. Not because they're weak, not because they're bad men, but because fear has become louder than faith. We tell ourselves, I'll never get better. I'll never heal. My marriage is hopeless. I am too broken. I've messed up too much. I'll always be this way. And eventually we start believing the report fear gives us instead of the promise God gives us. The battle is lost in our mind before it's ever fought in our lives. That's why Proverbs 18:21 says, death and life are in the power of the tongue. And that's why Jesus said in Matthew 12:34, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. What we constantly say reveals what we truly believe. That is why mental health is so important. Because many men are carrying battles no one can see. Depression, anxiety, addiction, shame, trauma, loneliness, and grief. And we've convinced ourselves the strength means carrying it all by ourselves. But that's not biblical strength. Jesus says in Matthew 11:28, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Not more pressure, not more weight, rest. Men don't usually break because they're weak. Men break because they've been too strong for too long by themselves. And that's exactly where I found myself in Iraq. For 6 months, I was one of the 10 spies. Every day I focused on fear. Every day I focused on what could go wrong. Every day I focused on death. Then one night on the rooftop, I finally gave it to God. The war didn't change. The report I was believing changed. And when the report changed, my life changed. So today I want to leave you with one question. Which report are you going to believe in? The report from fear or the report from God? Because there will always be giants. There will always be challenges. There will always be battles. But God never asked us to carry them alone. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path." Some of us are exhausted because we're trying to understand everything before we trust God. Sometimes God says, "Trust me first. The understanding comes later."
Yeah.
The strongest thing I could have ever done wasn't carry my rifle in Iraq. It wasn't to survive a war. It wasn't completing missions. The strongest thing I've ever done in my life was to surrender to God. Because surrender isn't weakness. Surrender is trusting God with what you are. Surrender is trusting God with what you were never meant to carry alone. And if God could bring peace to an 18-year-old kid standing on a rooftop in Iraq in the middle of a war zone, he can bring peace to whatever battle you are facing today. Thank you.